Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling harm. So today I'm joined by Lewis Vines on the podcast. Lewis, do you want to give us a brief introduction why you might be on a podcast called the Recovery Toolkit?
That is a great question of why I'm on a podcast about recovery. I'm someone who in the past has previously struggled with gambling addiction, and I am in a position in my life now where, having overcome that addiction, I want to help others who potentially are going through the same or have previously gone through some sort of addiction and are now in a place where, what is life? And having gone through that journey, I think that I have lessons that other people could possibly learn from.
Yeah, and I love that. I think out of the struggle comes a lot of hope, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we always try and put across on this podcast is a message of hope to people. And I know you've got one of them, so I am quite excited to have you on the podcast. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Okay.
Not all the way back, but like the back far enough so we can understand a little bit about what might have took you to addiction in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I am someone who was brought up in a military family. My dad was in the Royal Marines, and that meant that I went to numerous schools growing up. And I've told my story. I've only ever told my story once before, actually, on our podcast. And it was something that I was listening to that this morning on the way in to understand where I've even come from then to now.
Yeah.
And it was something that growing up, going to multiple schools, ultimately meant that I was really good at putting on a front of like, I'm okay, I'm fine. So I think I went to like 11 schools growing up. And part of my recovery was almost unraveling who I am as a person. And the multiple schools was something that made me almost be able to create a false version of myself. So when I describe this, you'll understand, and the listeners will absolutely understand what I mean when I'm saying it. If you are the new person in a school and you have to stand at the front of the class, that's fucking nerve-wracking, right? Like you're stood there, like you can't be nervous because you won't make any new friends. And if you tell people that you're emotional or scared or whatever, people won't want to be your friend and you potentially could get bullied. So I was really good at being the guy that every year, every couple of years, whatever it was, when I was changing schools, being like super, I'm fine, I'm great, I'm cool. Like, you want to be my friend. Like, this is a false version of me. I'm super happy, positive. I'm not nervous about this. Like, because I had to do that to adapt to a new environment all the time as a child. But actually, growing up through that experience, when I then had tough times in my life, I didn't know how to deal with those tough times as Lewis, the real person, because there was that false version of me out there. And compounding years and years and years of being a version of yourself to come across confident, happy, whatever, meant that ultimately when something really shitty came in my life and I didn't know how to cope with it, the crash was even harder because I didn't know who I really was as a person anymore.
Yeah, and there's loads of relatability in that, I think, Lewis. For one of the big things that, like, questions that jump straight in my head when you're talking like that, what was missing, do you think?
What was missing in myself?
In your childhood then? You know, moving around lots of schools and going to lots of different places. Yeah. What was the big missing thing, do you?
That's such a good question. Do you know what? I've never thought about that question. And all the therapy that I had, I was never asked that question. So I think it was real human connection. Not from so going to multiple schools and having very short-term relationships with people meant that there wasn't the depth.
Yeah, the
meaningful connection to be an authentic version of myself, or in a way that I could open up to others or learn to communicate to others in a deep way. It was all face value type stuff. And that also meant, I'm actually reflecting as I'm talking here, that also meant when I had struggles in my life, I didn't know how to have the deep, horrible, this is how I actually feel, raw emotion conversations. even like I love my dad, absolutely love him. He's one of my best friends. He's one of the coolest, smartest, hardworking people I've ever met. But growing up, I didn't have those deep conversations with him. Yeah. And so I was never taught to have those conversations. It wasn't what our family was. Yeah. I'm one of 3 children. So with my dad being in like Afghanistan or whatever, my mum had 3 kids to look after as a single parent. That would have been really hard for her. Yeah. So when it was really hard for her, it meant we probably didn't have the level of conversations around how we truly felt, thought, what our emotions were, what we were struggling with, because she was just trying to do her best and be a single mum. So I didn't even have the conversations at home as much as anything as well. Yeah. But yeah, when you say what was missing, I think it was that ability to get into the beyond the surface level emotion and how I really feel.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
For me, I speak to a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are in recovery, a lot of people who've been rock bottom, as we might call it, a lot of people who've suffered gambling, drugs, alcohol, all of those addictions. And generally, most of the time, you can tie it back to like some basic human need not being met somewhere in their journey. Yeah. You know, and belonging, connection, 2 massive things you've spoke about there that really you didn't have that real belonging. Yeah. You know, and when we get into recovery, I think we're massively talk about finding your tribe, finding your people, you know, whether that be in fellowship meetings, whether that be in communities, whether that be in places like Epic Restart, finding people who are on a similar journey who get you is so important. Yeah. And when you don't have that as a kid, it's really hard, isn't it? For me, what tends to happen, or what I see in a lot of people, is that manifesting in different ways in lots of different people. Yeah. You know, so I know we're going to move on to your story, and as we move on to your story, we might be able to tie some of this together a little bit, I think.
This is free therapy for me, I think.
Yeah. And do you know what it is? What I would say is don't share anything you don't want to share, obviously, and keep yourself safe, you know. But I think sometimes going on a journey like this is quite liberating. Yeah, massively. You know? And I know you have shared your story once before, which is great, but we might get a new layer of the onion getting peeled a little bit here. So we're looking forward to see where it goes. So after school, what came then? What followed school in those early young years of traveling about all over? Yeah,
good point to probably touch upon here. I think if I was to step back from that question and almost give an overarching view, I look at my life very much as someone who was a high achiever and ultimately failed. High achiever, ultimately failed. And for lots of points of my life, I didn't accept my failures were me. I would look at my failures as an outside reason why I failed versus me going, oh, I failed because I did something wrong. So growing up, bit like yourself, I was good at football, played at football clubs, and ultimately failed at being a footballer by the time I was 18. And again, having moved around a lot as well, I then went from living in Cornwall before then, meeting my biological dad. So my stepdad is the one in the military. My biological dad, I met him when I was 17. Really rich guy, really successful. And he came into my life when I was 17. So I moved up from Cornwall to Newcastle at, I think, just before my 19th birthday. And he had a business, got involved in the family business. And when you go from a world of trying to be a footballer, and that comes with its money and riches and like life excitement, to then your first real career job is a business that turns over 100,000 millions of pounds, and you're 19, first starting to properly go out, and you go from living in a town in Cornwall to then living in Newcastle, where the nightlife is unbelievable, but you also have shitloads of money. Like, that was one extreme to the other. And my first experience was going out with my friends and being the guy who could literally go and spend £1,000, £2,000 on a night at 19 years old, which is, when I look back at it now, I just think, what a dickhead. But back then, that was really, really cool. And I think all of those sorts of experiences of, like, it's so extreme, like none of my friends had anywhere near that sort of money. None of them, like they were part-time jobs in a bar type stuff. They'd just left college or whatever. And those types of like extreme high dopamine, I can do what I want, ultimately led me to being addicted to gambling as well. When I reflect on that, that's what happened. So ended up.
What did you get from that? So I like to throw curveballs in, Lewis. You'll probably find that out through this. By spending the money, the big money on the nights out, what did you get from that? What went on behind that? You know, because like you said, going around schools quite a bit, having to put the mask on, having to.
It was the same. It was the same behavior.
Same behavior. Just on a new level.
So where growing up in school, it was, I'm good at football, so you'll be my friend. There was that mentality. Oh, I'm confident you'll be my friend. It was then, I have money, so you'll be my friend. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, you'll be my friend because you're my friend. It was having a front, because all going out on a big night out, you're a dickhead showing off, right? And it was one of those where I was going out and I had lots of fake friends who would tag along or whatever that is. But it's not on them. That's on me, because I wanted friends. I was in a new city, new area. I sound different to people in Newcastle. So I was like, oh, I need to prove myself all the time. So I'll go out and I'll spend. So there's a place called Whitley Bay, and I actually live in that area now. And on a Thursday night, there used to be Jaeger bombs for £1. And I remember, so it's called Thursday the night. And I remember being in the bar and going, I'll have 100. Because I thought it was funny to like line the whole front of the bar up. And I look back now and think, what a twat. And those sorts of lessons of now reflecting, where when you're younger thinking, yeah, that was really funny, and everyone was like, oh, that's so cool. But after I'd bought that person a drink, I didn't have that deep connection with them. Yeah. They were my friends for 5 minutes at a bar. They weren't my friends for when I hit my low points that I could open up to and say, mate, I'm really struggling and I need to have a deep, meaningful conversation. Yeah. And they're the parts that when I reflect back on those times to now that...
And if I go back to the question I asked, just what was missing?
Yeah.
Connection and belonging.
That was it. 100%.
You know? So that's kind of grew from childhood into now late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned working in, obviously, your dad's business, quite successful business, and then the need for more.
Yeah.
Would that be fair to say?
Always.
Yeah. Always looking for that extra.
Always.
Yeah. That took you down the path of gambling.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a journey there. So football failed, business failed, then went to work for a university in London and started off in like a mid-role business development manager nationally, then became head of business development for the university by, I want to say 24. And when you think of most of my peers were 45, 50, and you're 24, you're excelling again in an area where other people probably aren't. Yeah. And again, that comes with good salary, good benefits, all those sorts of things. And then I went and joined another business and got shares in that business. They had huge backing. They'd previously sold, the backers had previously sold their business for £100 million. So it was a huge opportunity for me as, again, a 25-year-old to try and be successful. And then that ultimately failed. And then when gambling started to happen. So again, when I reflect on my story, it's that success, failure, success, failure. But I think a lot of the, again, just reflecting as we're talking, a lot of the success was probably trying to prove myself. Of like, I'm really good. I can work really hard. My brain can hyper focus. I can put the crazy amounts of hours in to be good at something. But then when I get there, because I'm maybe not doing it for the right reasons. I'm maybe doing it to show off that I can do it, versus doing it at that time, doing it to say, I want to do this and this is who I am. Yeah. So that's ultimately why I think I kept getting to those points and failing, because I was doing it for other reasons than myself. I was doing it to show off or whatever that might be.
Yeah, and I think just from this conversation we've had, the word that springs in my head straight away is self-worth.
Yeah.
You know, so, and this might be wrong, but correct as if it is, but what I'm hearing is your success brings the self-worth.
Yeah.
Like that's the evidence that I'm worthy and I want to prove a point and
Yeah.
I want to get people on side and I want to,
100%.
I want to be seen as successful,
Yeah.
and with that, when actually you're just really trying to find out who Lewis is.
Who I am, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
And from what you said, super, successful, and then a crash,
Yeah.
but then still having the resilience
Yeah.
to go out there and find something else.
Yeah.
And do you think that resilience comes because you've then got to then prove yourself again? And that's the driving force behind it?
Yeah, possibly. I think if I reflect back on all of those times, I never once did the work until I failed in gambling and ultimately became an addict. I'd never done the work up to that point of being accountable and owning my shit. So like I said before, I was always blaming it on exterior things. So like most of us, I have the ability to realize tomorrow's going to come. I need to get up and do it. So like I had that thought all of the time. So when I fail, I'm like, okay, start again, reinvent yourself. And I think that the changing schools helped that.
Yeah.
The fact that I got really comfortable in the uncomfortable parts. But I think until I really did the work, and I'm still doing the work. I don't know if you ever complete that work of really reflecting and knowing who you are.
I think my personal experience, the more work I do, the more work I realize I've got to do.
Yeah, I'm
And
kind of at that place
That's quite
now.
liberating, I
Yeah.
think, because it's just, if you're anything like me, doing the work is exciting,
Yeah,
and that's how I look at it, is how do I become a better version of me?
Yeah.
And once you start becoming a better version, you realize that there's so many more
Yeah.
areas of your life you can
So
do
much.
better in.
Yeah.
And it's not just about money or fame or success.
Yeah.
It's about
Purpose.
passion, purpose, fulfillment. They're the
Yeah.
things, and you get them things internally. Well, I get them things internally
Yeah.
from such simple things.
So I have a question for you on that. How do you deal with that? Like, do you know where you're saying like you're finding deep meaning in things? So it's the passion, the purpose, those sorts of things. How are you getting to the point where you're not in your own head about that? Because I'm really bad for like setting myself really high standards of, okay, so I want to be the best version of me, like you've just said there. But how do you not put yourself under that pressure? Or do you put yourself under that pressure? Because it eats at me. You can probably hear it in my voice. My brain's going like 100 miles an hour. So like I'll start running, because I know you run, right? I'll start running. I'm like, right, I need to run every day. I need to do a marathon. I need to do a triathlon. I need to do all these things. But have you got to a place in your life where you're able to not put yourself under that like extreme pressure to be the best version, and you just kind of are the best version, if that makes sense?
I think for me, you've got to gather evidence. This is what I see at people all the time. Work out what your values are, first and foremost, and then match your life to your values.
Yeah.
So I have some simple values, but be the example you want to see in others, be the student before the teacher, do things that make you smile. These are simple things that I live my life by. And them things that you see me do, the running, the being on the beach, being in the water, all that stuff, that helps us live my life by them values.
Yeah.
So them things align. When my life goes to shit a little bit, all I have to do is go, well, how am I not living my life by my values?
Okay.
And then you'll find friction. And when you stop living your life by your values, there's friction in your life.
Yeah.
So I think at that moment, that's when you've got to go, well, are they still my values? Do I need to change my values, or do I need to change my behavior?
Yeah.
And they're the two things. And then you get them aligned again. And then I like to see content. I become content in life.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, I want to be happy, and happy is just an emotion,
And it's a moment in time.
It's sadness, grief. All of these things are emotions that you've got to live with, but you've got to learn to live with them, not fight them.
Yeah.
And I think that was the difference in my early days. I was fighting the sadness. I was fighting the joy. I was fighting being happy. I was fighting every emotion, because I didn't really know what it was or how it showed up in us. But once I actually was able to name my emotions, sit with my emotions, and understand what was really going on, I was then able to create the plan out of the other side. How do I deal with them?
Yeah.
And that's quite a liberating place to get to. There's still times now when I really struggle. Like, I'm not going to say I'm perfect. I'm not. I'm still a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I think it's nice and liberating to know that the good days I'm going to really enjoy. The bad days got bad days and I'm going to get through them.
Yeah.
In the past, I didn't think that. The bad days were
They were
end of
everything.
the world, you know what I
they
mean?
were
That was the end of the world. The good days didn't really feel the emotion. So I just craved that high all the time. So not craving the high and being able to handle the low is a nice place to be.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like to say I'm content. I'm content in life.
Yeah.
The passion and purpose and fulfillment comes from them values, knowing exactly what it is that is going to bring me joy and fulfillment and all of them sorts of things. So giving back, being kind, you know, like the simple things, but actually they help you have a better quality of life. So yeah, you're not supposed to flip questions on us, Lewis.
Mate, it was a great answer though.
Very well done.
Great answer.
So as we move through your journey though, the gambling comes.
Yeah.
The gambling like takes you to a place where you don't want to be.
Yeah.
And then you ask for help.
Yeah.
Tell us what the help looked like.
That's a great question. I think I didn't ask for help initially is the first bit. And I want to touch on that a little bit because I was listening back to the story that I told this morning and I reflect on where I am today. I would still be gambling today, or I possibly would be dead if I didn't get help. So that's the first thing I would tell anyone. You need to speak up because if I didn't, I'm pretty confident I wouldn't be here. I remember for like 60 days, every day, my brain was saying, gamble or kill yourself. And you can't escape your own thoughts. When you wake up and your brain, and you close your eyes and your brain is thinking about dying, every pause in time, you can't escape your own thoughts. And I think that's something that was terrifying. The help for me came from a breakdown. So I tried to lie, hide what I was doing, tell people I was okay, just try and gamble my way out of a gambling addiction, which when you think about it, it's fucking mental. But
Insanity, isn't
it's
it?
absolute insanity, right? I tried to, when you think you tried to gamble your way out of a gambling addiction because I thought I was in control. And the pre-text that we just spoke about there, that alter ego front of I'm okay, I'm cool, I'm fine, like everyone be my friend, that part of my brain was convincing me that I can do this because no, you're smart. Like you've been successful in the past. You can do that. You're smarter than the algorithms on an online casino. You are 100% smart because you've won. So I'll delve a little bit into the story. The worst thing that ever happened to me in gambling is I won. So I went from first time I did the Martingale theory on online casino to anyone who's ever gambled before. Basically, you keep doubling your wager until you win ultimately, right? And as long as your bank is big enough, you can pretty much win most of the time. So I won a lot. So first time I did it, I won 200 quid. Then I won 5 grand and then I lost it. And then I won 30 grand and then I lost it. And over 3 months, I wagered like £500,000 of win, lose, win, lose, win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. So that tells you I was gambling like 10, 12 hours a day, all day, every day, all day, every day. And I ultimately lost control. And it's got to a point of like lying, hiding things from people that loved me, cared about me, friends, family. Had a massive breakdown. I remember being in the middle of the street, like sobbing, crying, like we're talking snot, tears, like pain in my chest, like literally sat in the middle of a road, like my body like in agony as I told the truth. And I remember saying it to my ex-partner, and I ended up speaking to another charity actually, and they put me on a crisis line, and the next day I was then in therapy. And the biggest thing I would say is I was, at that point, after being open and honest about it, I was ready for help. I think if I had those conversations that I ended up having in therapy a month earlier, 2 months earlier, when I hadn't lost, I don't know whether I would have been receptive to the advice and the process. But because I hit absolute rock bottom, I had no other option than to go, fuck, I'm either going to die or I need to do something about this really positively. And the help was actually having the true conversations about who Lewis is. So the point we raised before, not this front, but who is Lewis. So you talked about values there in your stuff. Mine, I didn't know what my values were. I didn't know what my ethics were. I'd never thought about it. I just went through life bouncing from failure to failure to success to failure to failure, like constantly just bouncing from one thing to another. And I was letting life live me. I wasn't living life. And that was something that I had to really step back and go, shit, like, who am I? What am I? Why am I in this position? And I'd never asked myself that question before of like, why? Because I think, I truly believe, and it's a saying that's possibly overused, but I do believe everything in life happens for a reason. And even like that whole process, I reflect on that now. I sit here like, I'm so grateful for it because I'm such a better person because I'm at least me, for good and bad. There's lots of things I don't like about myself because we all have things that we possibly don't like about ourselves. But there's things I don't like about myself. But I am me. I'm not trying to be someone that I'm not.
Yeah, and I think that's an important message for a lot of people is that was your time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you know that now. I first asked for help at 22.
Yeah.
I didn't go into rehab till I was 34.
Wow.
So that's quite a journey.
Yeah.
You know, of denial, of help, of denial, of help, of denial, all of that sort of stuff that you go through. And it wasn't until it was right for me that I got the help that I needed in the right way. And I was, not that I was got the help I needed, I was open to the help. And I think that's the big difference because you can get the help at any time. And I speak to loads and loads of people and say, didn't work for me. That didn't work for me. I'll say, try something else. You know? I'm a firm believer in, there's a saying that I love, and it's multiple pathways to recovery. Mm-hmm. You know, I tried person-centered counselling. I tried CBT. I tried Gamblers Anonymous.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that them things didn't work because all of them things, seeds were planted in my head, but I didn't become abstinent after doing them for a long period of time. I couldn't be abstinent for a short period of time, but then would lapse or relapse and I'd go back into old ways and behaviours. Yeah. But there was a seed planted at every time. And it wasn't until I went into rehab that I could address everything else that was going on behind the gambling, the drink and the drugs. Yeah. And then once I put all of them things into the same basket, and I just started looking at how do I handle my addiction rather than how do I handle my gambling or my drug use or my alcohol. That was when my life changed. Yeah. And out of that, obviously, I went on this journey of personal development, self-discovery, really. Yeah. And that was the point. But that was because it was the right time for me. Yeah. You know, somebody on this podcast said before, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I just think that's a great saying for a lot of people because that's where you need to get to sometimes, isn't it? Yeah. And lapses, relapses are all part of the journey for some people. Yeah. You know, and I've had many along the way. So I don't sit here with a clean slate of getting into recovery at 22 and 40-year-old now being abstinent and living a good life. I also know a lot of people who are abstinent and still have a shit life and still don't manage their behaviour.
Yeah, it's not still, Mecca. You don't get there and it's life's perfect.
Totally. So it's not, abstinence isn't always the main thing. It's about what do I learn? Am I trying to do my best? Can I hold my hands up and say sorry when I need to hold my hands up and say sorry? Yeah. And all of that as you go along the journey. Coming out of that, you got help. Yeah. Who did you get the help off?
NECA.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a guy, I'm going to shout out, he's called Paul, and I can safely say if I didn't speak to that man, I could have spoke to someone else, but that man 100% saved my life. He, quite like you've done today, asked questions that have never been asked, but he wasn't scared to offend me. He wasn't scared to call me out on my bullshit. He wasn't, because at first I probably put a front on because I was still in that version of myself of I'm okay, I'm cool. And I wasn't I almost didn't accept at the time that I was a gambling addict. Even though I would tell people, like my family, my partner, all those sorts of things, I would like, I was addicted, like I'm addicted to gambling, I felt like I was just giving them lip service because I had to. It'd been found out, so I had to tell them. So like, I didn't.
And you become accepting of it as well as a little bit, don't you?
Yeah.
And then oh yeah, I've got a gambling addiction, so it's okay that I'm a twat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I wasn't
can
owning my
hide behind
behavior.
it, you know?
Yeah.
That's the behavior of a gambling addict, so I'm a gambling addict.
Yeah. So he made me realize by going through my childhood, my experiences, my personality, potentially my lack of values because they weren't defined, that I was probably always going to get addicted to gambling. The trends, and we spoke about lots of things, and we would have conversations, and I would ask, because I'm really inquisitive as a person, and if I think about something, I want to know everything about it. So I was asking him questions, and he would say, Lewis, I don't know the answer to that, but for our next session, I will go and find the research on that, or I will find the statistics on that, and giving me that ability to not just deal with my addiction, but I really wanted to get to the root cause of why, so I can protect myself. Ultimately, in that moment of time, it was about how do I protect myself from myself, because I couldn't escape my own thoughts of gambling, kill yourself. I needed to really understand why my brain was doing that, so then I could overcome it. I think lots of people, and I've got friends who they might do drugs, alcohol, gambling, whatever. They will admit that they are addicted to something and say, I'm going to stop gambling, for example, or I'm going to not drink for a month, or whatever that might be. But they never address the root cause, so they're never going to change the behavior. Yeah. So for me, it was about, it became a life or death thing, like I say. So if I wasn't going to address the root cause, what was the point in doing the counselling? And I was in counselling in therapy for over a year. I ended up paying myself every single month. Well, I was doing it weekly still. So I ended up going into having a private therapist. Because beyond the initial help that I got, I became obsessed with trying to be the best version of myself, like what you were saying before. Yeah. And once you start that journey of self-discovery, and it sounds so wishy-washy bullshit, right? But once you start that journey of trying to be your best version of yourself, it feels so fucking good. Like when you start waking up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, I like that person in the mirror. Yeah. And you reflect on your week, and you might journal or whatnot. I do some of these things, and you go, I had a really good week. I didn't fuck up my life this week, or I haven't fucked up my life since that period of time. And when you keep doing loads and loads of positive good things, and yes, I still make mistakes, like we all make mistakes, and I'm acceptant of that. But when you keep doing loads of positive things, I'm addicted to trying to have a really good life. So I've moved my brain's obsession over gambling into just trying to make the most out of this limited time I have as something on this planet, the best I possibly can.
Yeah, and I love that. I think we work with a lot of people whose obsession is gambling, and then their obsession is not gambling. Yeah. And the fact, I always say to people, you need to find something else to put your time and energy into. Yeah. What are you going to put your time and energy into? Yeah. Being an addict, most of the time it ends up an obsession.
Yeah, like it does.
And finding the things that are good for you that you can obsess about, but still learning to understand and have boundaries in place that protect you are part of that journey. Yeah. But I think you've got to get obsessed about something to replace the obsession of the gambling.
I think so.
And whatever that may be for you, I see it in recovery, 12-step recovery. People get obsessed with recovery. Yeah. AA meetings, NA meetings, GA meetings. Yeah. I'm going. I was one of them. Yeah. Somebody said do 90 meetings in 90 days, 123 meetings later. I was obsessed. Do you know what I mean? And Nathan, who's been on the podcast before, he done 140 or 180 in 90 days.
Who's counting, eh?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And it was that like, I'm doing everything I should, and I'm there.
Yeah.
It then moved up for me. I talk about golf. I started playing golf. That's become an obsession.
Yeah.
And through my recovery, you've had to learn to put boundaries in place with all of these things. Yeah. And every time you move on to something else, or there's something else to focus on, it comes at a cost.
Yeah, it does.
It always comes at a cost.
Always, yeah.
But it's about understanding what is the cost. What's the trade-off? Is it beneficent? Is it benefiting us in a good way, or is it really costing us and affecting the way that I live my life? And I think that's quite a fine balance to find.
It is, yeah.
I want to move on a little bit with you, Lewis.
Yep.
So obviously gambling addiction, you got some support from NECA, which is fantastic. NECA is one of the organisations that we work with, and that's a really good relationship in the Northeast. So lots of multiple pathways to recovery, and I keep saying it. There's so many different ways to get help and support. Try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. Try something else. And if you really have that desire to give up, you will find the thing that works for you.
Yeah.
After that,
Yeah.
You went on this journey of self-discovery. You know, you're sitting here in front of us, a different version. Yeah. Quite happy with who you are now.
Content.
Yeah.
I think to your word before, content.
Content with who you are. And you decided to give back a little bit.
Yeah.
Wanted to do stuff to help others. Tell us a little bit about that part of your life now.
Yeah. So I, just like you, I have a podcast. It's called the Everyman Podcast. And again, when I think of things that helped me on my recovery, the podcast was one of those. So as a bloke, I'm going to put us all down here. We don't talk. We're really shit at talking. Women are naturally better at talking. Their community and their friendships, and I've had a bad day. Oh no, have you had a bad day? Are you all right? Like, what's happening? Men go, oh, do you want to go for a beer? So most of our thing, and we might chat on a beer, but we'll talk about football. We'll not talk about why we had a bad day. So I've put, really selfishly to begin with actually, was put something in my life that made me talk every single week about health. So have a podcast, and we cover human health, so men's, women's health, mental, physical. And when I say I became obsessed with, and I am obsessed with being the best version of myself, having a podcast, as you'll know, is one of the best ways to develop yourself personally. Because even us having this conversation, you're still reflecting on your own journey. And I think the more we constantly reflect, refine, understand ourselves, the better person we are. So that's enabled me to do that. And a big reason why I did the podcast and continue to do it is I never want someone to feel how I felt, of that life isn't worth living anymore and I should die. Ultimately, suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50. It's not the reason why... It's not something that people should be thinking about every day, because there's so many other options. We only have one life. Let's not waste it because we're struggling in a moment in time. So, yeah, I absolutely want to inspire people to talk more. And if I can encourage anyone to do anything, and I say this on our podcast all the time, is message someone you haven't spoke to in a while, ask them how they are. They'll say, yeah, I'm fine. And then they'll ask how you are. But then say, yeah, but are you actually? Even that little part I've found, I don't know about you, but when you were struggling, if someone said, Richie, how are you? You'd probably say fine. But then if they went, yeah, but mate, how are you actually? You might have opened up that second time. Where women have the deep conversations, they will have that real conversation. Blokes, we pie it off. It's almost like a token, how are you?
Yeah, definitely. I think in my very early days recovery, fine was my favourite word.
Yeah, fine.
And James, who's my therapist in rehab, said, fine only has one meaning, and that's fucked up, insecure, needy and emotional.
Yeah, I'm fine.
And I was like...
I was definitely fine then.
And do you know what it is? Like, every time I hear that, and I say, give us a different feeling, give us a different emotion, like, and then people have got to think, because that just rolls off your tongue, doesn't it? And that becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Everything you say there about finding space to talk, finding people that you can open up to, I think, so valuable. For me, the most important bit that's missing is finding somebody who can listen.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's really hard. And I think finding your tribe, I talk about it all the time, finding your people, finding people who can listen with empathy, non-judgment, and just hold space is the hard part. Yeah. And so many people I hear say, men have got to talk, men have got to talk, men have got to talk. But go and talk to somebody who can't listen. You'll not want to talk anymore.
Yeah, that's so true.
Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what? That is so, so true. And I'm not going to talk about ex relationships and things, because I don't think that's fair on other people. But at that time when I was struggling, I didn't have people who would actually listen. I was always wrong versus them being open to being wrong. Yeah. So it would be shut down if I started talking about emotions, and that's friends, family, whatever. I don't think, but that's partly on me as a person. And I think that's also a lesson to other people. We're not talking about health, addiction, recovery, and saying all you have to do is talk and people will listen, because you might have burnt relationships in the past. It's also on you to create those relationships with people. And if you don't have those relationships with those people, are they your people? do you need to find, as you say, find your tribe, find the people who will actually support you, encourage you to be the best version of yourself as well? Because that's so important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was what I got from 12-step recovery in the early days. I could go there, speak, and nobody would bat an eyelid.
Yeah.
Nobody would try and fix us.
Yeah.
Nobody would give us advice. And everybody would just go, pleased you're here. I'd be like, fuck.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
Pleased you're here. Like, and then you see people laughing, having a life, having a bit crack. Like, what they got to be happy about? Do you know what I mean? Like, life's tough. But that was kind of what I got. And then...
See, I never did any of that.
And then I moved on and had coaches.
Yeah.
And then...
Like life coaches.
Like life coaches. And we worked for some amazing people, some of them being on the podcast. And do you know what it is? The coaches that I worked with just were really good at asking questions.
Yeah.
And I was going, oh, fuck. Like, posing something else. And that's became a bit of my passion. Like, ask a good question, you get a good answer. Yeah. And, you know, and ask a good question.
I've learned that.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? You ask a good question. And if I ask a good question of you, you've got to think deeply. Yeah. And, you know, and building that relationship and rapport, I think is just so beneficial to people. So finding people who can hold space. Yeah. And somebody, like you said before, can challenge you on your bullshit. Yeah, yeah. And hold you accountable for your actions is a win-win for everybody, I think.
So powerful.
And do you know what? I get the bigger buzz. When I ask a good question, someone gives us a good answer, I get the biggest buzz in the world, you know. So one of my big values I didn't mention before, but I might have mentioned it, help other people to help yourself. And so in the early days of me helping people, it was like, I want to help other people. I want to change the world for that person. And you know, them corny lines that you have. Yeah. And he was like, full of shit, Richie. Why do you really help other people? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, He's like, what do you get from it? Yeah. And actually, I was helping other people because it helped me. Yeah, I was, you know, like you started a podcast. Exactly. Selfishly started a podcast because it made you do the thing that you were talking about. Yeah. And I think that's so important that it's okay, but it's okay. Yeah. It's okay to say it.
Yeah. Back then, I would never have said it.
No,
you know?
I wouldn't have said it. Oh, people will think that I'm an arsehole, or people think that I'm arrogant because I'm doing this to help myself.
How self-centered am I? Yeah. How arrogant? Yeah.
But actually, coming to the realization that it's okay. Yeah. It's okay that you do this to help other people. Yeah. But you help yourself in the same process as well. Yeah. And that keeps you well, and that keeps you on track, and grounded. That keeps you, it keeps your feet on the ground and doing the right things, you know. And we do move through life. And what the other thing I would say is what served me in the early days doesn't serve me now. Yeah. And things change and things evolve. And that's life, isn't it? Like, even not in recovery, that's life. I read something the other day that every 6 to 10 years, you've got to reinvent yourself anyway. I was like, that would explain my life. You know, 6 to 10 years or 6 to 10 weeks.
My problem was I was doing it every year or 2 years, which is,
And that gets tiring, doesn't it?
So
and then
tiring,
you really don't know who you are. But actually that process of evolution, moving through life, you know, friendships come and go, people come and go, jobs come and go, everything can come and go, feelings come and go if you feel them. You know, the problem comes when you don't feel them and you suppress them.
Yeah, if you're feeling them. And I don't think I was doing that enough. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. So we spoke about how your podcast's out there to help other people. Yeah. One of the things we ask everyone that comes on the podcast, what's 3 to 5 things in your toolkit that help you manage your life and your recovery now?
Great question. One of them will be the podcast. That creating a space every week for me to talk. So that's almost a cop-out though, because most people don't have a podcast, so that's probably not that helpful for people. The other would be creating better relationships with people, where having opened up on my journey and having a genuine interest in other people's health, so my friends, my family, actually having deep conversations with people, that massively helps. I get a lot out, just like you, I get so much out of helping people. I feel good as a human if I can listen to someone, if I can try and give them some advice.
Selfish, that.
So selfish. I'm such a prick. But yeah, it's one of those where like I genuinely get so much out of that. I run a lot. I think running's free therapy. Again, that doing hard things. So I try as much as possible to put really hard things in my life and consciously choose to do them. Because then when the things that I don't choose that are really fucking hard in my life come, I probably have a way of dealing with them better. So it's all up for me. Resilience is a skill. I look at resilience as a skill, and it's something that if you're trying to make your life as easy as possible all of the time, when something hard comes, you are not prepared for it. So I'm constantly trying to, whether that's trying to run crazy amounts, whether that's playing football, whether that's working out. I try and read a lot. So I mentioned before, I'm super inquisitive. I am one of the only people I actually know, and this is going to sound like such a knob comment to say, but I am obsessed with learning and understanding new things. And because I've become so passionate about health, like I read so many books. So I roughly read a book a week at the minute, and I've been doing that on and off for like 2-3 years now. So since the addiction, and there's been times in my life where prior to addiction I was doing that. So I read very often, because I think, why try and make every mistake yourself when you can learn from other people's mistakes? Like listening to podcasts. I listen to your podcast. I think it's class. Listening to other people's experiences, I think is brilliant. And then trying to have fun. Like trying to put as much fun in my life and do things that I enjoy is huge. So how many people here, and if you're a listener, how many of you on a Monday morning know what you're going to do for the rest of the week? And because most people, like I said before, will bounce into failure, and go, fucking hell, I'm tired. That was a long week. That was shit. Like, I can't wait for the weekend so I can just go out to the pub and get drunk or whatever. How many people actually think, what would a good week look like for me? So is that exercising every day? Is that a good diet? Is that making sure I take breaks at work? Is that getting out for a walk? Is that seeing friends, family? Is that watching the series that I really want to watch? Is that going to a football match? Like, what are the things that when you plan your week, what are you doing to make sure you have a good week? And I consciously will plan a week ahead. And then I also have a moment where I reflect on a week back. So I will say, this week I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And at the start, that might take me half an hour the first time I ever plan a week. But now it takes me 3 or 4 minutes, because I know what a good week looks like, and I know what a bad week looks like. And it's just making sure I remove the bad stuff that make me have a shit week and put more of the good stuff in.
Yeah, and I love that. I think one of the big things we really focus on at Epic Restart is the journaling stuff and creating space. One of the very good coaches I worked with, one of his favourite sayings to me was, if you don't plan for success, Richie, your day will be filled with shit.
It's so true.
You know, and
it is so true.
And then it was about going, well, actually put in the big rocks, we call them at Epic. We put your big rocks in first.
Yeah.
So for me, that's, when do I see the kids? When do I...
Yeah, you put the important
do
stuff.
the hobby, like the hobbies are important. Me big work commitments. Yeah. And then everything else fits around that.
Yeah.
You know, so they're important to me. You know, I get in the sea a few times a week. I do a few runs. They're important to us. I like to play golf. It's important. When am I seeing my kids?
Yeah.
They're the important things.
Yeah.
People go, but you've got to go to work. And I go, yeah, I do go to work. And that all fits in.
Yeah.
You know, but them big rocks, them important things. Where do I get my passion, purpose, and fulfillment?
Yeah.
They have to go in first.
Yeah.
You know, and I would love to sit here and say, I don't do anything in my life that I don't enjoy. Well, that's just full
None
of
of
shit,
us do,
isn't
yeah.
it?
None
you
of
know,
us
you
do.
have to do a bit of that, you know, but
100%.
but at least I
usually
know.
Work. Well, yours is definitely a lot more purposeful than my marketing job, I have to be honest.
But that said, because I know I have going to see the kids on a Monday night, you know, like spending time with my pals, running, going in the sea, whatever it is, I know that's coming.
Yeah.
So you don't mind doing a bit of the stuff that's not as exciting.
Yeah.
You know, but it still needs to be done, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
completely agree.
yeah, I love where the conversations went.
Yeah.
I love the journey you've been on.
Thanks, mate.
And yeah, I think there's a lot of inspiration and hope for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, find them things, that passion, purpose, fulfillment.
So true.
And yeah, find someone who can listen.
So true. Couldn't agree more.
Lewis Vines, thank you very much for coming on.
Top man.
Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling-related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.